I thanked my son after I signed those papers. It was the most expensive mistake of my life. Because 6 months later, those very signatures gave him the power to all but throw my dying wife out of the house she'd lived in for 35 years. He called it an asset protection plan. His lawyer called it a smart move. I called it trust. And that trust nearly killed everything I had left in this world. What keeps me up at night isn't the money. It isn't the house. It isn't the papers. It's the betrayal from the very son I trusted with my whole heart. Through all those nights I stayed awake caring for my wife with Alzheimer's, the woman who was slowly forgetting her own name, sometimes forgetting who I even was. My own son was quietly turning me into prey. My name is Walter Boyd. I'm 79 years old, a retired structural inspector, 41 years signing off on bridges and overpasses across the state of Georgia, and not one of them ever fell down. I was proud of that. I lived in a yellow clapboard house on Tatnall Street, in the Thomas Square neighborhood of Savannah, the kind of street where the live oaks lean over the road and shake hands in the middle, where the porches are deep and the neighbors still call you by name. My wife Carol picked that house in 1988. She walked through the front room, watched the afternoon light come through the old wavy glass, and she said, "Walter, this is where we get old." She was right about nearly everything. I stopped being surprised by that around year 10. And for the last 2 years and 3 months, I had been her whole world's gravity, her pills, her appointments, her good hours, and her frightening ones. That was my life. That was every inch of it. Carol was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at 66. From that afternoon on, I did not own a single day that wasn't shaped around her. But here's the part I didn't know was happening in the same rooms, on the same days. The young man I prayed for every night, the one I called my son, he was emptying me out one careful withdrawal at a time. And I'm going to tell you exactly how he did it, because somebody out there needs to recognize the shape of it before it happens to them. We'll get there. But do me one small kindness first. Tap subscribe. Most folks listen to the whole thing and never do it, and it costs you nothing, and it means the world to a channel like this one. Hit like while you're there, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Stay with me. This one stays with you. The doctor who delivered the news was a neurologist named Dr. Pruitt over at the Memory Clinic on Abercorn. Soft-spoken man, the kind who said the unsayable so many times. He's learned to slow his voice down to a walk, setting each word in front of you like a stone across a creek so your mind has a chance to step from one to the next. He told us on a gray Tuesday. I drove home in total silence. Carol fell asleep against the window somewhere on Victory Drive, the way she did after long appointments. Her head tipped toward the glass, one hand open in her lap, like she was waiting to be handed something. I watched her at every red light. I kept telling myself the same 3 words. Drive. Get home. Then brake. I pulled into the driveway on Tatnall Street, and I shut the engine off, and I sat there for 25 minutes. Just sat. And I thought about the money. $360,000. Every cent of it accounted for, and not 1 cent of it for me. Not for a boat, not for a trip, not for a single thing a man my age is supposed to finally let himself enjoy. All of it was for Carol. For the memory care home I'd already secretly driven out to look at, the good one on Skidaway Road with the garden courtyard. For the one private fear I had carried in my chest for years and never said aloud to a living soul that I would go first, and leave her with no one and nothing. At 79, that fear isn't some far-off thing. It is the last thought in my head every single night before the dark takes me. 3 days after Dr. Pruitt's office, the phone rang. My son, Damian Boyd. Dad. His voice was warm and level and certain. The voice of a man who's already decided and is only informing you. I'm coming home. You can't carry this alone, and I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. I'll be there by the end of the month. I want you to understand who I am. I am not a man who cries. My own father thought tears were a kind of leak in a man's character, and he sealed me up accordingly. I have stood dry-eyed at gravesides. I have been laid off and signed the papers without my voice cracking. I held it together through a winter in 2004 that I still won't discuss, and I cried on that phone call. Couldn't get a word out for a full minute. Just held the phone against my ear and breathed like a man who'd been underwater too long and finally found the surface. Because I thought this is the son she always saw. She was right about him all along. Carol had spent 30 years insisting there was something good and steady in that boy, something I squinted to find. And here he was, proving her right at the exact moment it mattered most in the world. I didn't sleep that night either. But for once it was relief keeping me up, not dread. Now I need you to stop with me right here, because everything I'm about to describe, every kind gesture, every burden he lifted off my back, every evening he showed up and made my life lighter. I need you to hold all of it next to one single fact I didn't learn until much, much later. The first withdrawal from that retirement account happened 5 days after Carol's diagnosis. 5 days. He wasn't coming home because his parents were drowning. He was coming home because he'd seen treasure, and it happened to be wearing the face of a tragedy. But I didn't know that. So let me tell you what I did see, because what I saw was good enough to fool a man who'd spent 4 decades inspecting things for hidden cracks, and thought he could read people the same way he read a load-bearing beam. Damien rented a place over in the Starland district. Close enough to be there in 10 minutes. Far enough to look like a man with a life of his own. He was at our house 5 days a week. He came to Carol's appointments, learned the names of every nurse and aide, asked the sharp questions I was too tired to think of. Dr. Pruitt told me once it was rare and wonderful to see a grown son so involved. I stood there nodding, prouder than I'd been in years. He took the bills, the insurance calls that ate whole afternoons, the grocery runs to the Kroger on Habersham, the prescription pickups at the pharmacy on Bull Street. He carried everything that had been quietly pulling me under, and he made it look like nothing at all. And I thanked God for him. Every night. Here's what I didn't know. He was studying every number his hands ever touched. Around month 3, Carol had a terrible stretch. 3 bad days in a row, confused, scared, reaching out for her mother who'd been gone 30 years, asking me what month it was and then asking again 4 minutes later. I hadn't slept right in 2 weeks. And for the first time in my adult life, I forgot to pay a bill. 40 years, never once. Damien came by on a Thursday evening and sat across from me at the kitchen table. He had a folder with him. He set it down between us with the care of a man who'd thought hard about this exact moment. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really hear me." He had this way of speaking, even, unhurried, like each sentence had been practiced just enough that it didn't sound practiced. Like a man who'd found the blueprint of your deepest fears and was handing it back to you, folded into a favor. "You're 79. Mom is 66. God forbid something happens to you tomorrow, and I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to protect you both. What happens to her? Everything's in your name. The pension's in your name. If you go first, all of it freezes while the lawyers fight over it, and Mom's sitting in this house, unable to touch a dime during the worst time of her life." I let that settle into me, and every word of it landed precisely where I was most afraid, like he'd been crouched in my bedroom at 3 in the morning, reading my private terrors right off the inside of my skull. "These are power of attorney documents," he said, opening the folder slowly. "No rush in him at all. Giving me room. It just means I can handle the financial side completely. The bills, the accounts, the pension paperwork, so you can put every ounce of yourself into Mom. You're carrying too much, Dad. Let me take this part." I looked down at the pages. My eyes were so heavy. My hands ached. I was running on fumes and love and the particular bone-deep tiredness that only people who've cared for the dying really know, the kind that doesn't stay in your muscles, the kind that seeps into your judgment, into the part of your mind that's supposed to slow down and read carefully before you put your name on a thing. I signed. He had it all notarized the next morning over at a shipping store on Waters Avenue. He mentioned it to me later like it was the weather. And God forgive me, I slept better that night than I had in 4 months. I thought I'd finally handed something heavy to a man strong enough to hold it. What I'd actually handed him was the key to everything I'd ever saved. If you've ever been so exhausted that you signed something you should have read, if you've ever trusted someone because you were simply too tired to do anything else, then you already know the door I just walked through, and you already feel the cold air coming. Now run the clock forward through 26 months. 5 a.m., medications, endless appointments, good days where Carol laughed at something from 1,990 like it had happened that morning, then couldn't find the bathroom an hour later. 26 months of holding yourself upright because she needs the one solid thing left in her world to stay solid. 26 months of lying awake in the dark after she's finally down, doing the math, how long will it last, will it be enough, will I be enough? And then a Sunday came that split my life in two. Dinner at my daughter's place across town in Ardsley Park. My Renee. My younger one, who got her mother's gray eyes and my own hard head in equal measure. Her husband Marcus, a quiet man, works in compliance at a bank downtown. The kind of fellow you'd walk right past at a party and need more than anyone in the room when the floor falls out from under you. There was a low country boil, cornbread, the grandkids thundering up and down the hallway like a storm with sneakers on. Carol was in the lavender dress I love on her, having a good evening, warm, present, laughing for real at something Damien said across the table. And Damien was Damien, loud and generous, topping off everyone's glass before they asked, spinning a story about a fishing trip out toward Tybee with the easy grin of a man with absolutely nothing weighing on his conscience. Then Marcus's hand found mine under the table. He pressed his phone into my palm without so much as glancing my way. 6 words glowing on the screen. Check your retirement account right now. Then 3 more underneath. Then fake chest pain. I looked up at Marcus. His jaw was set like poured concrete. His eyes were perfectly still, the eyes of a man who'd been waiting a long time for the right moment to open a door, and had finally decided this was it. One slow nod. The kind that says, trust me, don't ask, just trust me. I opened my banking app under the lip of the table. I hadn't looked at this account in months. Damien handled the money. That was the arrangement. That was the deal I'd made. The number on the screen was $11,260. I stared at it. There had been $360,000 in that account. 41 years of it. Every dollar set aside for one woman and one purpose. 11,260. Damien was laughing at the end of his own story across the table. Carol was smiling along, bless her, though she'd lost the thread of it 3 sentences back. The grandkids were shrieking somewhere down the hall. The whole house smelled like supper and butter. I laid my hand flat against my chest. I don't feel right, I said low. I think I need some air. Renee was up out of her chair before I finished, worry so real on her face that even Damien looked briefly concerned. She's her mother's daughter. She can wear calm like other people wear a coat. Marcus walked me out to the car. And Damien, my son, my blood, the man I had wept with gratitude over 26 months before, stood framed in his sister's doorway and waved at me with my own face. Feel better, Dad. I'll come check on you tomorrow. I sat in that car, and the first thought I had was not about me. It wasn't about the money. It was about Carol. That $360,000 was her net. The home on Skidaway Road I'd walked through twice in secret. The one I'd prayed over in the dark. The whole shelter I'd spent 41 years building around the woman I could not bear to leave behind gone. And the man who took it was standing in a lit doorway, waving like his hands were clean. The truth doesn't land on you all at once. It comes in pieces, and every piece breaks something different on the way down. Picture it with me. A 79-year-old man in the passenger seat of a gray sedan, on a quiet Sunday in a pretty Savannah neighborhood, the engine humming, the streetlights just blinking awake, the sound of his own grandchildren still drifting faintly through the walls behind him, and that man is staring at $11,000 where a lifetime used to be, and he is very, very still. Not calm, I want that to be clear. I was the furthest thing from calm. I was the stillness that comes when your mind is handed a fact so big it simply refuses to move until it's understood what it's holding. Like a machine fed a file it was never built to open, Marcus pulled out without a word. He didn't drive me to a hospital. He didn't drive me to a police station. He drove me downtown to his office building on Bay Street, up to the 6th floor. The place was empty on a Sunday evening, and our footsteps came back at us off the marble, like we were walking through a church, which, in a way, we were. He was about to show me something holy and terrible at the same time, and I was not going to walk back out the man who walked in. Marcus shut the door. He sat. He looked at me the way a doctor looks at you right before he says the thing you'll never be able to unhear. Walter, he said. And he never called me Walter. It was always Dad. I need you to understand that everything I'm about to show you has been checked 3 times. I didn't come to you with a hunch. I came to you with a case. How long have you known? I asked. 4 months. 4 months. I let it sit. I didn't get angry. Not yet. Because the look on that young man's face told me those 4 months had cost him plenty of sleep too. Why did you wait? He folded his hands on the desk. Because Renee had to be completely certain before we tore her brother apart in front of her father. And because I needed every door closed before you ever knew one was open. I nodded. I understood him completely. Then he opened the folder. He started with the withdrawals. 16 months of them, always between $3,000 and $5,000, never above the line that triggers a federal report, spread out at odd, irregular intervals. Never the same week, never the same amount, loose enough to spend freely, careful enough to stay invisible. "This has a name," Marcus said, sliding the first page across to me. "It's called structuring, and it's a federal crime all on its own, completely separate from the theft." I looked at those receipts laid out in a row across his desk like evidence at a trial, which is exactly what they were. Neat, documented, damning. My son had robbed me with the patient discipline of a professional, the very discipline I'd spent his whole childhood trying to teach him. He'd finally put it to use, just not on anything good. If you've ever discovered that someone used the best thing you tried to give them as the weapon against you, if you've ever watched your own values turned around in someone's hand, then you understand the cold that moved through me right then. Then came the pension. Damien had taken the power of attorney I signed at that kitchen table on the night I was too wrung out to read, and he'd gone straight to the administrator of my retirement system. He presented perfect, legal paperwork, and asked them to redirect my monthly pension into a second account he controlled. They processed it without a blink. Why wouldn't they? The papers were flawless. My boy had made sure of that. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the wall behind Marcus's head and did the arithmetic and felt something move through me. I still don't have a clean name for. Not rage, not grief, something older and colder than either one. Then the statements. He'd quietly changed the mailing address on my retirement account to a post office box he'd opened on his own over on Waters Avenue. The paper statements stopped coming. And because Damien handled the money, because that was our deal, because I trusted him the way you trust the ground under your feet, I never once noticed they'd stopped. I'd been flying blind for more than a year, and the man who turned off the lights was sleeping in my dead mother's old guest room when he stayed over to help. Then Carol's account. Marcus slid a single page toward me, and I knew from his face before I read a word that this was the one that would do the most damage. Carol had kept a small savings account of her own for decades. Her quiet money, her own little square of solid ground in a marriage where I handled most everything else. She rarely mentioned it. It was just hers, something she'd built slow and careful across 40 years, the way women of her time often kept a little something tucked away for themselves. Gone. Emptied completely, using her power of attorney. On her bad days, she didn't remember it existed. On her good days, it never crossed her mind to check. Damien had chosen his window with a surgeon's eye. I put both hands flat on that desk and looked at them a while. Just my hands. Old hands. Hands that signed off on 41 years of bridges that never fell, and signed off on a Thursday night on the one thing that did. "There's one more," Marcus said. I looked up. He slid the last page across deliberately, the way you save the heaviest weight for after a man's had a second to brace himself. It was a beneficiary change form, and my signature was on it. I remembered the morning, the second I saw it. Month 9. A frantic Tuesday. Carol had been up most of the night, and I was scraped down to nothing, trying to get her dressed and fed for an appointment. Damien showed up with coffee and a little stack of papers and said, "Just routine account stuff, Dad, sign here. I've taken care of all of it." I signed without reading a line. And buried in that stack was a form that removed Renee and my grandchildren completely from my retirement account and put Damien in their place. My own hand, my own pen, erasing my daughter and her children from everything I'd built. I did it myself. I just didn't know what I was doing, and Marcus wasn't finished. "There's one more thing you need to know," he said. And this is the part that decided everything for me. For months, Damien had been dropping careful little remarks to the wider family, at cookouts, on the phone with cousins, in the parking lot after church. Things like, "Dad's really struggling. I'm worried sick about him. He's not managing the way he thinks he is. I've had to step in more than anybody outside this family realizes." An elder law attorney Marcus had quietly consulted recognized it on sight. Damien was building the foundation for a conservatorship petition. If he could get his own father declared incompetent in a courtroom, and he'd been patiently planting that story in people's minds for months, he'd be named my legal guardian. And every illegal thing he'd done would become court-approved. Everything I still owned would pass into his legal control. He wasn't only stealing from me, He was building a cage around me, one soft, worried comment at a time. I sat in that chair on the 6th floor, and I looked at Marcus, my daughter's husband, the quiet man nobody notices at a party, the one I'd shared Sunday dinner with for 11 years, and something inside my chest shifted into a place it has never come back from. "How did you find it?" I asked. "Routine compliance review," he said. The structured withdrawals flagged a pattern. I pulled the file. I saw your name. Then I closed my office door, and I didn't say a word to a living soul until I was sure. My phone buzzed. Renee. Marcus answered and set it on speaker. Her voice was perfectly controlled, the voice of a woman holding herself together by sheer will and barely managing it. She said Carol was fine. The grandkids were settled. Damien was still there, hovering, asking after my health, performing his devotion to an audience of nobody. Then she went quiet a moment. "Dad," she said softly, "Mom just told Damien he's a good boy." She patted his hand. She said he always was. Nobody spoke. The three of us just held that sentence in the air. I thought about what it had just cost my daughter to stand in that kitchen and hear it. Renee had spent her whole life defending her brother. To me, to her mother, to relatives who whispered, to her own doubts at 2 a.m. She'd covered for him, and explained him and loved him past every reason not to, because that's what she believed family meant. And he had used that love as the cover, while he robbed their father of the only thing he was saving for their mother. If you have ever loved someone past the point where the evidence ran out, if you've ever defended a person and then had to be the one to finally stop, then you know the specific grief that was sitting in my daughter's chest in that kitchen. Then Marcus asked me, quiet, almost to himself, "What do you want to do, Walter?" Here's the thing about being 79. Sitting in an empty office on a Sunday night with $11,000 to your name and the full weight of the truth pressing down on every bone you own. You've got 2 roads. You can be loud. You can call your son this minute and say every true and terrible thing piled up in your chest looking for the door. You can be the fire, or you can be something quieter, something colder, something that actually helps her. I thought about Carol, about the home on Skidaway Road, about the staff I'd shaken hands with. I thought about what the next chapter of her life was supposed to look like, and what it would look like if I let my anger pick up the pen. I looked at Marcus. "I want every door closed before he knows one is open," I said. "Not for me. For her. I want her protected first. Everything else can wait its turn." He nodded once. He already had a plan. Honestly, if that were me back when I was younger, the man my father raised, I don't know that I could have done it. I think I'd have grabbed him by the collar in that doorway. But I learned by then what Carol always knew. The fire feels good for about a minute. It doesn't keep anyone warm or safe. There's something they don't tell you about justice. It does not feel the way the movies promise. You spend your whole life watching the hero get his moment, the confrontation, the speech, the villain's face finally caving in. You think when your turn comes it'll feel like winning, like a breath you've been holding for years finally let go. What nobody tells you is that when it's real, when it's your own blood, it doesn't feel like winning at all. It feels like surgery, necessary, correct, and permanent. I drove home to Tatnall Street that night and sat in my driveway for the second time in 26 months. The first time, I was figuring out how to protect Carol from a diagnosis. This time, I was figuring out how to protect her from her own son. Monday morning, I was in the office of an elder law attorney named Gloria Vance, 12 minutes from my house. Marcus had called ahead. She was waiting. I walked in at 9 with every page Marcus had given me, and she went through them the way a surgeon goes through a body, methodical, unflinching, seeing exactly what had to come out. By noon, every power of attorney Damien held over Carol, and over me, was formally revoked, filed, processed, effective immediately. My son lost all legal access to both accounts before he sat down to his Monday lunch. He had no idea. Gloria then started emergency proceedings to reverse the beneficiary form I'd signed blind, the one that erased Renee and the grandchildren. They were restored. Damien was removed. He still had no idea. By midweek, Marcus's compliance department had opened a formal investigation, and the case file he'd spent 4 months building was handed to a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit, a man named Sergeant Hollis. Hollis told Marcus it was the cleanest case file he'd ever received from a private citizen in his career. Marcus just nodded and thanked him. That's who he is. Then Damien came by the house. He brought groceries. He sat with Carol while she watched her show. He tidied the front room without being asked. He poured me a glass of sweet tea and asked how I was feeling after the scare at dinner. Much better, I said. Just tired. You know how it goes. You've got to take care of yourself, Dad, he said. I worry about you. I looked at my son across my own living room. I thought about $11,000. I thought about Carol's quiet little account. 40 years in the building, emptied in an afternoon. I thought about the cage he was assembling around me, one worried remark at a time. I picked up my tea, and I said, "You're right, son. From here on, I'm going to start paying very close attention to everything." He nodded. He looked pleased. He had no notion of what was already turning in the dark all around him. And here's where I have to be honest with you about my own boy, because I promised myself I'd tell this true and not just easy. I don't think Damien woke up one morning a monster. I think it started small. I think he told himself he was owed something for coming home. I think he looked at all that money just sitting in an account and decided it would only rot there, or vanish into nursing home bills, and that he was the responsible one, the one who'd stepped up, the one who deserved to decide. I think every withdrawal had a story he told himself, and every story made the next one easier. That's the part that frightens me most. Not that he was evil, that he was a man who reasoned his way there one comfortable step at a time. Most people who do something like this aren't cackling in the dark. They've simply convinced themselves they earned it. The next Sunday, I called him in the morning. "Son, I'm feeling so much better. Come to dinner this weekend, here at the house. Bring something nice. We've got a lot to be grateful for." He showed up at 6 with an expensive bottle of wine and his widest smile. The table was set with care. Carol was in the lavender dress, the one I've always loved on her. She was having a good evening present, warm, funny in the way that used to make me fall for her all over again on some ordinary weekday. She told a story from 35 years back that made Renee laugh in spite of everything she was carrying. Renee, sitting at that table with her mother's laughter in her ears and 4 months of her brother's betrayal in her bones, holding it all together with nothing but love and grit. Marcus beside her, quiet, steady, invisible to anyone who didn't know what he'd done, which was everyone at that table but me. And Damien sat at the head of it, and was everything he'd always performed. Charming, generous, devoted. Topping off the glasses, laughing at his own jokes. The golden boy at Sunday dinner, like the last 16 months had never happened. The food was good. The butler was almost convincing. And then, part-way through the meal, there was a knock at the front door. I stood up. I walked to my own door, across my own floors, through my own 41 years, and I opened it. 2 financial crimes, detectives, plain clothes, paperwork in hand, calm, unhurried. I'd spoken with them 3 days before. They knew exactly where they were, and exactly who they'd come for. I heard Damien stop talking mid-sentence behind me. I stepped aside. The detectives came in, and I watched my son's face the very moment he understood. "I'm going to tell you something, because this part matters more than all the rest." There was no guilt on his face first, even then. Even in that moment, his very first instinct wasn't shame. His eyes shot fast across the room to me, to Marcus, to Renee, to the door hunting for the exit that wasn't there. There was no exit. Every door was closed. Renee stood up slowly. She'd been turning over what she wanted to say for a week. She'd written it and cut it and stripped it down, and when the moment finally came, she found it was simpler than anything she'd planned. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. "I want you to look at Mom before you leave this house, Damien." The room went silent. Damien looked at Carol, and Carol looked back at her son with nothing in her eyes but pure, unclouded warmth. She didn't understand what was happening around her. She thought, maybe, that Damien was leaving early after a lovely supper, the way he sometimes did, and she wasn't ready for him to go. She lifted her hand. She waved at him, gentle and slow. "Good night, sweetheart," she said softly. "You're such a good boy. You always have been. Let that sit. Let it fill the room." Because in that one moment, Carol's disease did the cruelest, kindest thing I have ever witnessed. It protected her son from ever having to watch her face change. Damien would never see his mother understand what he'd done. Her illness would carry him gently through the rest of her life, with his name still clean and warm in whatever was left of her mind. He would never have to earn that mercy, and he would never, ever lose it. Then Renee spoke, quiet and clear. She'll probably believe that to the end, Damien. Her mind will keep you safe from ever seeing her face change. You will never have to watch her understand what you did to this family. She didn't waver, but I understand it. Dad understands it. And I need you to know every withdrawal you made while he was up at 5 in the morning giving her pills. Every paper you slid in front of him while he was half blind with exhaustion trying to keep her alive. Every single time you sat at this table and let him thank God for you. I know all of it. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure both of them are okay. Not because I have to. Because that is what it actually looks like to love someone. They walked my son out the front door of the house on Tatnall Street. And Carol, my warm, my beautiful, my still here Carol, watched him go and waved cheerfully from her chair, believing all the way down to the bottom of her that her son was just heading home after a nice family dinner, the way he always did. Damien pleaded guilty. The trail Marcus built was too clean, too complete for any lawyer to fight. Elder financial abuse, criminal fraud, federal structuring, restitution was ordered. It comes back slow, in pieces, the way he took it. Some of it doesn't come back at all. I've made my peace with that. Or I'm making it. Some days that's the most a man can do. But Carol's care is protected. Gloria Vance found pathways I didn't know existed, emergency planning that could still shield her even with the account bled the way it was. The home on Skidaway Road, the one I'd walked through in secret and prayed over in the dark, is still within reach. Carol is going to be all right. Not perfect, not the life we drew up, but all right. And all right now is the whole world to me. This is what the last 2 years taught me, and I'd hand it to you across this table if I could. The danger almost never looks like danger. It looks like help. It looks like someone lifting the heaviest thing right off your back at the exact moment you can't carry it one more step. And the mistake most of us make, the one I made, is believing that exhaustion is a good enough reason to stop reading what you sign. It isn't. Not ever. So here's the one thing I want you to do today, before you close this and move on with your evening. If there is anyone managing your money, your medications, your paperwork, anyone at all, even someone you'd swear by, set up a way to see your own accounts with your own eyes, on your own phone, that nobody else controls. Not because you don't trust them, because trust and verification were never supposed to be enemies. And here's the question I want you to sit with tonight. If everything you'd quietly built to protect the person you love most got taken not by a stranger, but by family, would you have the strength to choose the quiet road over the loud one? I don't fully know if I had it. I just knew Carol needed me to find it. Now, I want to hear from you, because I read these. Tell me in the comments, type a 1 if you think I did right by going quiet and legal instead of confronting him at that table. Type a 2 if you'd have wanted me to look him in the eye and say every word out loud. Type a 3 if you honestly don't know what you'd have done in my shoes, because that's an honest answer too, and the one I respect most. And tell me where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is where you are right now. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you've ever had someone you trusted turn that trust into a weapon, tell me. You won't be the only one in that comment section. Not by a long way. If this story moved you, even a little, do an old man a kindness and subscribe. And hit that like button so more people who need to hear this can find it. We tell real, raw, family-honest stories here, and your being here is the reason we can keep telling them. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you, truly. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Savannah to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.